recently launched his new book, What's Wrong with Boards? And that re-examines governance and board operation, highlighting a need for a fundamental rethink and change to achieve effective board governance. So there's a topic, since I'm a professional director, that's very near and dear to my heart, I must say. So it gives me very great pleasure to introduce our special guest speakers. David Gonski, ACS, CPA, one of Australia's most influential and powerful business leaders, with an unparalleled track record of contribution as chairman and director, investment banker, and corporate lawyer of industry-leading companies. Zia Qureshi, executive director, New Wilkie Energy, and chairman, Catalyst Managerial Group, and a leading global business development and transformation specialist in Australia. Zia's key contributions include large-scale multi-year business transformation, technology, business development of new ventures, and governance. Zia has also worked closely with Fred Hilmer on Fairfax transformation and has a long-term relationship with David Gonski. So clearly we've got incredible speakers tonight and that wealth of experience, knowledge and skills, so we're in for a really wonderful evening. I'd like to welcome our guest facilitator and moderating this evening, Megan Motto, Chief Executive Officer at the Governance Institute of Australia.
So I'm going to start off the questions. I'm going to throw to you, David, if you might make just some opening remarks. Now, you've worked with Fred, obviously, for a long, long time and are very familiar with the book. Might you just take us through some of the main concepts of the book and what the premises really is?
Listen, thank you. And firstly, thank you for having me. And if I may, I compliment you on being part of this group. I think this is a good read, and I have no financial interest whatsoever. Right at the beginning of the book, and I just thought I'd take a quote from it, it states that all is not well with governance in Australia, that boards are being loaded with more tasks by legislation and the like, and that basically substance is favoured, it is lost over form. The tie doesn't work. And substance is lost over form. There are so many points in this book that actually articulate, to be blunt, what I've thought for some time. And it's quite interesting. First point I would make is Fred Hilmer is somebody who's been an academic, been a company director, been a businessman, been an advisor through McKinsey's, and indeed has led parts of the University of New South Wales as a Vice-Chancellor. So there are so many things in this book that I thought were good, and so what I was thinking was actually to take off his name and put mine.
But over to you first, Zia, for your take on some of the key outcomes from the book for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, having worked closely with Fred on the transformation of Fairfax for a couple of years, I can relate to his thinking in this book and believe he has made a great contribution. It moves us away from the more of the same approach to improving governance. It's time for a real change. And that's what David alluded to us. He's created a platform, an excellent platform for change in our thinking about governance and its effectiveness. While there's been a significant amount of effort and work in improving governance over the last decade or so, my view is the overall effectiveness is still well short of the mark. But in real world, things are complex, the business environment is rarely stable, human behavior is difficult to manage, and the only constant is change. And that too, in current environment, is exponential change that we face. The governance model as it stands at the board level is not well equipped to deal with the real business world situation.
He deals with the question of why do we need independent directors? And more particularly, he asks the question, how do you define independence? And he actually says, why don't we look at the question of whether they have the ability to ask questions and actually the ability to listen to the answers.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me share some of my observations developed through my hands-on work with boards and CEOs over a long period of time and working with some of the largest Australian company CEOs and boards. Firstly, I feel through my work that most of the boards are really able to develop full business knowledge and insight that is required to undertake and control a business of a complex nature. The strategy and performance areas, from my practical experience and as highlighted by Fred Hilmer, more importantly, well fall short of the required level of focus. Secondly, I've always found that there is a very sophisticated management filtration, information filtration process. So this results in board being kept in the dark in relation to bad news, weaknesses, threats, and exposures. Thirdly, the false sense of assurance from governance activities such as internal audit, risk management, and external audit causes confusion, to say the least. Under the above circumstances, the highly experienced people assembled as a board become ineffective in their governance role. My experience also indicates that when boards led by a proactive chair roll up their sleeves and get into depth of business and not afraid about stepping on management or CEO's toes, seek independent advice, the governance landscape changes tremendously.
And I do believe, by the way, very strongly that diversity does provide a better basis. That I have no doubts. But I think if you look at the team and you say the team is there to question, the team is there, I'm not sure whether it's to roll up, as you said, I wrote it down. Qureshi, we can talk about that. To roll up our sleeves, to question, to supervise, to get as much information as is reasonable, etc. So that's the way I would go.
Absolutely right. And David, when I meant roll up your sleeves, I meant, look at the information, critically analyze it, etc. Don't accept it at face value. Get some independent advice. Because, with respect, I've just seen so much bullshit being fed to the boards. And I've been there to say this is wrong. Risk can be managed. It's often the information, the overload of the papers, and that it just always seems to be chasing the tail. There's not enough time. Understanding of the business. As a consultant, when I went into some of these organizations, I spent 2-3 months studying this organization left, right, up, down, everywhere. I could kid you not, I knew more about the business than the whole of the board. I had to educate, bring them along, and encourage them to spend time. And that resulted in this multi-year appointment to really work with management and team and really bring that gap closer. Until such time, these things were just totally eliminated, and the management team and the board started working in the relative position.
And of course then that's a one-size-fits-all approach. And then another concept in the book is we shouldn't be striving for best practice, we should be striving for best fit.
I think it is a balance. This question of getting information, this question of getting involved. And I think the good board member has this mixture, and as I said, Fred summed it up very well. You have to be helpful, but you're testing. It's a schizophrenic relationship. And
Fred rightly says that more of the same won't work. It's fundamentally flawed. So you end up with examples such as WeWork, ABC Learning, Crown Group, CPA, AMP. But when you look at Crown Group situation or situations like Crown Group, one may ask, what has changed since the days of Burnfield? Do people still remember Burnfield, a great Australian company?
Directors, and I'll call it exactly that. But also we've moved towards a more formalised model of director selection. So
my view is it's a team. If you start with saying you want a team, then you don't actually start with the candidate. You start with who you are missing. And I think you start with saying, I want a team, as you rightly said, of diverse thinkers, and as Fred would say, and I agree with him, of people who have independence of mind. But I think the question is, what are you trying to do? If you're trying to run a team, then, for example, particularly in this world of needing risk people? Do we have risk people? Do we have diversity, both of gender and outlook? I'd also say where they trained, what they've done, age groups, and so on. And I do believe, by the way, very strongly that diversity does provide a better basis.
I'm going to come back to a question around board remuneration and overboarding, because they're a corollary to this particular topic. The expectation that boards should lean in more, and as completely appreciate that shouldn't be managing, but certainly leaning into more information, more investigation, more identification of the key issues. But then the corollary to that is then the remuneration of boards and overboarding. They're really important topics. I wonder if you've got some comments around that, as well as just
in the long run happens that people, and I've heard some directors saying, well, I only get $30,000, so I do so much work. I mean, how much more can I do? So I said it's a business we're running. It's not a charity. People should be remunerated for their time and their work. And at the end of the day, board costs are, immaterial to multi-billion-dollar organizations. And you expect a lot. So you've got to really provide that, because that sends a message that we expect. It's not about rewarding them. It's like saying our expectation is that you will put these hours in. And most of my transformation for these large companies, while we had all the analytic work and our own experiences, etc., large amount of contribution for transformation work, for turning around companies, came from the board members. So I was able to tap into the whole board's collective knowledge to help fix the companies. And smart CEOs also do that. They're not shy. And this is where the chairman, I know David has a very, very good approach in his chairman role in dealing with CEOs and mentoring and meeting and that sort of stuff.
I mean, the first thing I would say is that it's absolutely correct that the relationship between the chair and the CEO is vital. This book says it, but it's true. I don't believe that two people who are buddy-buddy can be really the chair and CEO of a large listed company. You have to have that mixture. Now, I've described it as, I mentioned earlier, schizophrenia.
But my point was, when I was saying rolling up the sleeves, the board, for their role, have to do a lot more than they do. In closing, as Fred says, more process will not address the structural imbalance in time, information flow, and in-depth knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, the management guru, Professor Fred Hilmer, has spoken. It's time for a real change. Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you. So it is no doubt the most that you learn in life is through sitting around with phenomenal individuals who have got so much life experience. And I would like you to all to join me with thanking the wonderful Dave